it's the shared purpose that makes a movement so important. And when you can take a shared purpose and you fuel that with action, and even like collective action, where you have a lot of people focused on taking action, so that we can enact change and create a different world. That's what gets me excited to wake up every morning. The idea that we are mobilizing a community where we're changing mindsets and beliefs, that business can and should stand for something different than just simply making money for the owners of the company.
When I saw you talk, you spoke in a way that's aligned with a lot of the things that we believe in the work that we do at Nice Work. And I asked you, told you that we're here to talk about branding, and you shared that you are very much in the infant stage of what you're doing. But I also believe that brands are built around story and narrative. So could you share with us your story around Do More Good and why people should care about it?
Yeah, of course. I would say that the seed of what became the Do More Good movement really happened when I was in high school. I attended a training program because I got to serve. I was elected to serve on my high school's student council, and I was forced to go to this program to learn how to be a servant leader, and it was like the world's worst penance for a 15-year-old. I thought it was like going to be the absolute worst week of my summer. It ended up changing my life. I went and learned about the fundamental tenets of servant leadership, and there was this quotation that hung on the wall in the little classroom that me and the 12 other kids that were in my cohort, we called it a co-op, but me and the other kids in my co-op sat in this room for 4 days, and the sign hung on the wall, and it said, "I expect to pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness I can show, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again." And when that workshop ended, I went home to my little tiny Nebraska town that I grew up in, and I asked my leader of my cohort if I could have the sign. I took it off the wall. Well, that sign still, it's above my desk at work. I've had it, my entire adult life, and that was the seed that kind of planted what I later learned was going to be a life's mission. And I didn't know what it was going to be about. I didn't know how it was going to be applied. None of that stuff. Fast forward many years later, 30 years later, I built a company called Firespring that was featured in Inc. magazine as one of the 50 best places to work in America. And we won all kinds of awards. I started speaking a lot about company culture. And as a result of that, I did a TED Talk on company culture, TEDx talk, that had more than 1 million views, and it started to grow really fast. And so I thought I was going to write a book about company culture. This is back in about 2018 now. And what I learned in the process of researching that is that culture is only like a small part of what building a business and a business that has a meaningful impact on society is all about. We interviewed, I brought my team together at Firespring, and we interviewed more than 2,000 leaders of businesses who were recognized at some point as one of the best places to work in whatever, pick a country, a state in the U.S., whatever. There's been all kinds of companies that are featured on those lists of best places to work. Over the course of a year and a half, we interviewed more than 2,000 of those leaders. And what I kept hearing over and over and over again was way more than just company culture. First and foremost, it's about having a cause or a purpose or a North Star that everyone in that organization is aligned around. I guess people want to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. And it's also about community and all aspects of what community means to every individual. And so I started to pull together these resources. Firespring had become a certified B Corporation back in 2014. And I started learning about 1% for the planet and about the Global Impact Initiative and through the United Nations and all the other things where different organizations, different people, different groups were trying to figure out how to use business as a means of doing good in the world, and perpetuating this mindset that you can do well, financially and in your career, and also do good in the world. Those are not mutually inexclusive. And so the rise of the triple bottom line and all the things that we heard about and read about really compelled me to this point where I understood that business leaders, just aside from those best places to work, which is a very small percentage of the companies in the world, other companies, other business leaders, through groups I'm involved in with EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and YPO, Young Presidents Organization, and Vistage. These are groups of business owners around the world that has like 100,000 members among those groups. And even in those progressive business groups, the vast majority of the business owners had very little understanding and knowledge of what it even meant to be a purpose-driven company, or what it meant to serve stakeholders as opposed to just merely being focused on serving shareholders. So we built the Do More Good movement around the mindset that we wanted to take a stand for transformation and abundance. And we do that by training business leaders how to adopt the mindsets of a Do More Good company, which is what we learned in all that research. Number one is, it's people first. Businesses succeed when their people thrive, hands down, whether it's professional or personal growth. The second mindset is purpose-driven, meaning that, again, people want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And the third is where profit lives. It's in the growth orientation. It's a learner's mindset, this mindset of always finding a better way of adapting and evolving, and making sure that you are focused on, for lack of a better phrase, kicking ass and taking names, making money so you can actually do good in the world. You can use the profit you generate to make impact in the world. So we've been putting together and continuing to elevate our training and our programming, our educational resources. We're building the world's largest database of case studies and examples of best practices in business, and how to build engaging work cultures, and how to take care of the people you have, and how to serve your communities. And so that's what we're driving, and that's what it's all about.
I mean, I love that. I think there's a lot in there to unpack, and we work with purpose a lot at Nice Work. We find it's a really great aligning tool for the internal team. Like we see it as a really good internal sort of piece to pull people around. So I think we are fully aligned at that. But what I enjoy, one thing I'm realizing more and more in the sort of LinkedIn age that we're moving into is consumers, customers, and staff often look to the leadership of companies to sort of as one frame of reference as to how do these people see the world. So it's so important for founders to have a point of view on something, to have a reason that they're doing this thing. And what I find so compelling in your story is that that line is quite obvious. It's quite linear there, and it makes sense. So you say at the kind of infant stage, but I think when I hear you speak, it feels very compelling, and it's interesting to hear, which means you've got the root of something amazing that other people can go, oh, I emotionally connect with this, and I would like to at least understand more. Whether they end up doing it or not is a whole nother conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I enjoy in your brand name is this name a movement, because it's both a bold thing to say and an easy thing to fail, but it's also in its naming, it sort of goes a little bit against the kind of business model of this is ours, we own it, we building this market share. Can you talk about this idea of creating a movement and not creating a business?
Yeah, of course. The Do More Good movement is a nonprofit organization, and the reason that I feel so strongly about referring to it as a movement and focusing on the movement part of it is I think by just definition of the word movement, it's a collective effort by a group of people who come together to create change or advance a cause or achieve a shared goal, whatever it might be. And all movements, regardless of what it is, are driven by shared beliefs and shared values and a vision for the future. And I think it's the shared purpose that makes a movement so important. And when you can take a shared purpose and you fuel that with action, and even like collective action, where you have a lot of people focused on taking action, so that we can enact change and create a different world. That's what gets me excited to wake up every morning. The idea that we are mobilizing a community where we're changing mindsets and beliefs that business can and should stand for something different than just simply making money for the owners of the company. It's a mindset that we often refer to it, the work that we do, and we have a model built all around this. We call it Main Street capitalism. As you go back, after feudalism kind of failed and businesses started to happen, over the course of time, and independent ownership and the ability for an individual to maintain a shop or whatever. Main Street businesses across the world in every society were the pillars of those communities. It was the businesses that held together the fabric of communities for centuries. And somewhere along the way, whether these people, I have Milton Friedman up here on my wall as well, a lot of his famous quotations. But whether it was Friedman or somebody else, somewhere along the way, business transitioned away from being these entities that supported and maintained like the vibrancy of their communities to individual pursuit of success, and families trying to retain or and make more money and create more wealth. And there's nothing necessarily inherently wrong with that, but when it's done solely for the purpose of amassing wealth for an individual or a family, and it's not thought about as a way to uplift the community that buys their products and services, that does the work, the employees that work inside these organizations, we lost our way. And I think capitalism, especially aspects of it, there are aspects of capitalism like the corporatism and the cronyism that happen in capitalism are the parts that we need to do away with. And we need to rethink the models so that every business understands that they have to serve the communities and they have to create impact for the people that work in those companies, the people that buy their products and services, the people that are part of the communities. Businesses that don't understand this, I don't think they're going to be alive in 5 to 8 years, because the tide has already turned. The Gen Z generation will not buy products and services from companies if they know that they are not good stewards of their communities, and people won't, and that they won't want to work for them. So business leaders that don't understand they have to change the way that they think, I believe, are going to suffer a disastrous fate. So we're just trying to help get the word out in time for them to change.
Yes. So I want to jump back a little bit, and I'll come to that. I think it's an interesting discussion, but you mentioned this idea of a movement and collective action, and I think what's interesting in there is this idea of ownership. Like, who owns the ideas and the movement? Who retains ownership of that? And this is I think coming back to your conversation now about the shift in capitalism, is it doesn't necessarily, the success can be amplified if
Hmm.
multiple people have ownership in the outcome versus just the company or the people who started it. It sort of the success piece of it expands. And we did a stint going through sort of blockchain and Web3 technology. And I think one of the things that was so interesting there is it unlocks the ability for people to co-create and co-own with
Yeah,
businesses. And as a future model of success, I believe that thing can be very, very, very sticky and very, very powerful. And you see this in sort of movements that are started at grassroots and how large they can become. Things like the Red Hat Brigade and the umbrellas in Hong Kong and Black Lives Matter. These things went from nothing to massive, and there's companies that are expending millions of dollars trying to do that. And it comes back to this idea for me that who's owning this, who's benefiting from this, and if there's a collective benefit and a collective ownership, the scale possibilities and the impact possibilities go up tenfold.
absolutely. And one of the things that is coming to mind as you're saying that is a nonprofit by definition is owned by the community. I don't know how the nonprofit laws apply all over the world. I know in the States, where I live, if a nonprofit organization has $1 million in its bank account and it goes out of business, or in other words, all the board members die in an automobile accident or something, and it has to shut down. By definition, that $1 million is given to the community, the municipality in which that nonprofit resides, and the community authorities decide where to distribute the money. So no one owns a nonprofit. It's not owned by an individual. It cannot be. It's against the law the way it's structured. So this mindset of ownership is a key distinction between a business and a nonprofit. That is the key distinction, is ownership, that word. And so there are so many models that are happening around the world right now that are evolving around employee ownership models. There's all kinds of different, one of the biggest things that we're seeing is where business leaders that are looking to exit a business or transition out, and let's say they don't have a child or family member that is eligible or that's interested in taking over the business, and it's not the kind of business that they can list with a business broker and sell readily. Oftentimes, we see employees getting ownership in a company, and now what we're learning is there are so many difficulties around employee ownership, because instead of having an owner or a family that owns it in these employee-owned companies, now you have 10, 20, 100, 1,000 different people who own, and they all have their own unique ideas, thoughts, and perceptions about what should happen.
Yes.
And that creates oftentimes even more dysfunction than what we were seeing before the business transitioned to be employee-owned. So I think the idea of stewardship and the idea that people should and can be the beneficiaries of the success of a business, but without necessarily being an owner of the business, is the current trend that we are seeing, that has the most legs for where we see things going in the future. I refer to them as employee benefit companies as opposed to employee-owned companies, where the beneficiaries of the financial outcomes of a business rewards the people who actually made it work, the employees of that company. So we're working on all kinds of models through the Do More Good movement now, around this idea of employee benefit companies and how to structure them that way. And it very well could be the future of business.
I think it's also, because one of the big buzzwords is this idea of community. Community has the potential to be a new defensible moat for companies, that if there are people if there are people invested in the success of the business and that's spread quite wide, it's much more difficult for that business to falter or fail because people
Mm-hmm.
are emotionally, financially, kind of spiritually invested in the success of this thing. But once again, with community, there comes a challenge, because if you make a commitment to community, it's not something you
Mm-hmm.
can turn off when things start. The kind of finances aren't doing so well this month. Let's just not, let's just not do that
Mm-hmm.
for a month. It sort of, once you start, it's a path that you keep kind of you have to keep going down. And I do believe if you do
Mm-hmm.
choose it, it can be very valuable. Can you talk a little bit about, and I think this is something that's quite difficult for businesses to understand and brands to understand, is when do you think kind of community benefit, or how do you think about community firstly, and when do you think people should or shouldn't be unpacking this and kind of investing time and energy and effort into it as a business? And often we're working with people who are in, I don't know, let's say scrap metal. They're like, but
Yeah.
how does scrap metal benefit its community? It's a weird concept. It's not like a fashion brand or a retail brand or something where
Mm-hmm.
the link is quite obvious.
So I think of community as the connective tissue that ties a company or a business to its stakeholders. It's where trust and respect and shared purpose comes together. And so the way we approach the idea of community in the Do More Good movement is that it's obviously far beyond a location or a physical space. It's about the connections that happen with everyone that comes within any contact at all with the business: employees, families, vendors, contractors, customers, clients, the shareholders. And when you foster a sense of belonging among all different parts of that community and all the various stakeholders, then you create a network of support that drives success of the business. And so a community and being part of a community, it gives something people to believe in and something to belong to, whether they identify it as their thing or not. If it gives them this sense of unity around shared outcomes and shared purpose and all of those things. So when we think of community at the Do More Good movement, that's what we're thinking about.
So how would brands or businesses go about sort of investing and fostering that more?
It's about uh, making sure that everyone inside the organization, again, it kind of comes back to those mindsets that I mentioned before. If we start with the mindset that people always come first in a business, and it's more than, and there's so much depth behind that. We could spend it in the entire time discussing just around each of these three mindsets with the depth that are in there. But people first, but then and then again, purpose driven being the second mindset. It is so critically important um, that people, whether they're again inside the company, outside the company, part of the general community, or someone that considers themselves part of the community, that they feel like they are part of it, that they belong in it. So it's the purpose driven aspect of a company that transforms a business into a brand, in my
Mm,
opinion. It fuels a clear and meaningful reason for being. So it's not about what you do; it's about why you do it. It's
mm,
the compass that keeps a business focused on creating value that goes way beyond profit.
mm,
So when we think of activating purpose, the way a Do More Good company might do, it's simply committing to meaningful impact, and then making sure that actions are more important than words. The old Maya Angelou quote, which is another thing that I have, up on my wall. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Mm.
And I think that mindset around purpose is what is where that sentiment is embodied.
I love this idea of belonging, creating that sort of emotional connection, and our whole thing is about making people care. It's like, how do you get people
Mm-hmm.
to have an emotional attachment or response to you? And the definition of care that I love is this definition of attach importance to something. So it doesn't have to be
Okay.
this soft, like, oh, I care and I love you. It's like, I attach importance to the thing that you're doing, and that could be serious, it could be friendly, it could be funny. It doesn't actually, the sort of framing of that doesn't necessarily matter to me. But
Mm-hmm.
I like this idea that if you can foster belonging in something, so if you can get your team to feel like they belong,
Mm-hmm.
and their families and their people to feel like they also belong, you start this really strong base. And then if you can get your customers to experience that feeling of belonging, then they might also feel that they
Yeah.
belong, which is, I think, what so many companies and brands are trying to do. Is they're trying to get people to feel the stickiness, especially in this time where we've in a way, in the communications world, we sort of moved away from good narrative into this Facebook, Google ads, transactional,
Mm-hmm.
like you're buying customers, rapidly, and you're churning them as fast as you're acquiring them. And,
Yeah.
there's not this sort of deep relationship. But then you are seeing companies that break that trend, and they start, there's that running brand on, which I find very interesting. Like, people are starting to be like irreverent about this thing, and it's because they've given that sort of sense of belonging and that idea, and they built a shoe with their community, and they're doing these interesting things that make people feel this sort of irrational loyalty to it. So that's a really nice concept that I think people can play with.
I love that, and I believe that the key to creating caring is intention. The intentional practice of prioritizing and nurturing well-being and growth and the success of again all the stakeholders that are part of a business. I think that we too often think of getting people to buy into something as opposed to enrolling them in a mindset. Very different things.
Mm.
The moment the moment any business leader has in the back of their mind that they need to convince someone of something is the moment they have failed. There's no convincing when intention is pure and practiced in the right way. It just happens organically.
That's fascinating. Um, what I enjoyed, the first presentation you gave me was talking about the sort of the big idea that you're trying to push with Do More Good, because one of my challenges that I've personally felt when working with purpose and charity and nonprofits is, a lot of the time, the premise is based on the idea that people feel abundant. And therefore, when they feel abundant, then they feel generous, so they can give.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm feeling good, so we're going to donate X amount this year, and we're going to whatever. But as soon as times hit hard, and we're a couple of years out of COVID, but that was like a bomb that hit. And the number of sort of generosity campaigns that were created, shrunk immediately as the world contracted, and all of the downstream businesses and people and communities were immediately affected as soon as that generosity sort of died. What I love is when you can tie it into a win-win scenario. So I'm making
Mm-hmm.
money and helping people, or having impact, because then I continue to be driven to be more successful, and by doing that, these things come along, and you've got this this idea that has the potential to sort of accelerate something like that. Can you talk about the audacious idea that you have under this idea of do more good?
Yeah, of course. And I will share that the genesis or the origin of the idea that, or the thing that sparked where we are now, is when Yvon Chouinard made his exit from Patagonia, and shared that with the world. Essentially, for those that don't know about how he did that, Yvon Chouinard set up a perpetual purpose trust, and essentially granted, transferred Patagonia, the company that was at the time was making $100 million a year in excess profit. So it was, he was wealthy, his kids were wealthy, and rather than pass the business on to his family, he essentially transferred ownership to this perpetual purpose trust. And so now there's a group of people who are lowly paid. That's key. There's no financial incentive for them in it. It's really their incentive is to maintain the propriety of decisions that the company makes, and just to make sure that the company is doing right by the mission and vision of Yvon Chouinard long after he's gone. And then there's this Holdfast Collective that he created, which is a charitable entity, and 100% of the profits, the dividends throughout the year and at the end of the year, go to the Holdfast Collective. And then that nonprofit then uses the money to help organizations all over the world that are mostly focused on the earth, on the environment, because that's what Yvon Chouinard is passionate about. So I started doing a bunch of research and found, and because I was curious, are there other companies that have ever done anything like this? And it's fascinating. There was a symposium that happened in Seattle where a group of lawyers pulled together. They had studied the Yvon Chouinard exit in Patagonia for a year, and there was these attorneys from around the world that flew into Seattle to learn all about how Yvon had done this. And so a couple of hundred attorneys and tax accountants in a room. It sounds like a great party, right? And they spent several days just dissecting this from all angles. And a very good friend of mine was there, and she shared with me kind of what she took out of it. And I asked her, are you aware of any other organization or any other entity that's done this? And in particular, what I'm curious about, is there anybody who's ever created like a perpetual purpose trust, which is a nonprofit, organization. It's not a for-profit. And instead of having one company like Yvon Chouinard did, that it becomes a holding company where they actually purchase or transfer ownership of businesses. And the outcome, the profits, then are used to make the deep impact in the communities that those businesses serve. And she was not aware. We started doing research. We actually worked in partnership with a law college that is in our home state here, and they put their students on this. And we were researching all around the world, didn't find any examples, so we just created one. And our moonshot that we have now publicly stated is that we intend to build for lack of a better term, I'm referring to it as a private equity fund, because that's what the world calls it. Mm-hmm. I'm not a fan of the words private equity because there's so many negative connotations that come with that space. But just for lack of a better term for now, to scale a private equity firm to $1 trillion in assets under management in less than 10 years, which would put it on par with BlackRock Capital, the largest private equity firm in the world. And so we intend to do that by creating a path for business owners to exit when they're ready to exit their company, to exit to a private equity firm that's actually owned by the community, by a nonprofit, that directs the profits to create generational wealth for the employees that work for that company, and generally to uplift humanity. And the way that that's done is that when a business is owned by this private equity firm, when an entrepreneur or business owner or leader, a family member that's inherited the business from their great grandparents, whatever it is, if you're a business owner and you're ready to exit, traditionally, here's what we know. Most people will take the most money they can get to take their money off the table and then to go do whatever they want in the world. They can give it away to charity. They can buy a plane or anything in between, whatever they decide. It's their money. They deserve it. They earn it. But they also have a desire that their business, this baby that they've either tended to or created, wherever in the timeline they took ownership and leading it, to preserve the legacy of what they've created. We raise our children, we send them off into the world. We want them to do good things. Same with business owners. We build a business. We want it to have a legacy that exists for decades or perhaps a century or more. And what we also hear from the business leaders that sell their companies is they want their employees to be taken care of, the people that help them build it. And here's what we know about private equity. The first thing, these three things, taking money off the table, taking care of the employees, and preserving the legacy of the thing that you built, of those three things, the only thing that private equity ever fulfills is the first one, taking your money off the table. I can cite, I have more than 20 friends that have sold their companies to private equity, and I don't know one of them, not even a single one, who in private with me, they may say different things publicly, but in private conversation, how frustrated and disappointed or sad that they are about what's happened to this business that they created, because private equity's role is to extract as much value out of that business as possible, even if it means parceling it off and selling it off, whatever. Their role is to increase the value and to sell it again. That's what private equity does. So our model completely changes this. It's if a business is owned by the Do More Good private equity fund, 1/3 of all of the profits that are generated by that company are paid back to the employees in a profit sharing plan, a very progressive profit sharing plan that actually allows the employees of that company to create generational wealth for their families. 1/3 of the profits are given back to the community, directed by the employees. So the employees have a voice into where the money goes. But a full 1/3 of the profits are given to nonprofits or to schools or whatever it is that the employees of that business think needs their support and help. So it really substantially increases the fabric of our communities. And then the final third is reinvested back into the fund so that it can scale and propagate. So it's a third model. It's the world's first private equity firm that is focused on injecting value into society and to the families that build these businesses, as opposed to wringing and extracting value from it. And we believe, because we've had these interviews with hundreds of business owners, we believe that given a choice, any business, and we're not talking about these gigantic scale like Meta or Facebook or Google. We're not talking about those kind of businesses. Those are public companies. It's a different thing. We're talking about the average business in any community across the world. These could be tradespeople like plumbers and electricians and things like that that have a business that might be $10 million. Private equity is not interested in that. It's really hard to put it on a listing and sell it to a business broker, for example. But for those kind of businesses to have a pathway to exit where they can take their money off the table and go do whatever they want for the rest of their lives and take care of their employees in perpetuity, because they're going to be the beneficiaries, and create deep impact for the communities that they care about, that is a win-win-win scenario where everybody comes out ahead. And so we're building this new model. And we would love nothing more than for 20, 30, 40% of all of the companies in the world to be owned by private equity holding companies that are owned by the community rather than owned by individuals. We're open sourcing our model. So all the documentation, the legal framework, everything, we're open sourcing it, and we're going to publicly share it with the world in hopes that others will follow suit and build similar opportunities to do this all around the world. We have no interest in controlling it or harboring it or keeping it to ourselves. And I will never make a single penny from this, but by design. It's really important to me that I don't and that I won't. nor will the other people that are helping build it. It's about doing something that is the right way to impact the world. And I could go on and on about the business aspect of why we think these businesses will be more successful. We've done so many research around the governance aspect and how it's all going to work, but also how to attract the best and brightest entrepreneurially minded people to come run these companies because of the impact they're going to be able to make on these families and in the communities that they serve. We believe that we'll attract the absolute best and brightest business leaders to run these companies because of the opportunities that it gives them.
I mean, I think it's such a cool idea because of that thing of firstly, I think that if a business is truly invested in the people in the community, it makes different decisions, and I think those decisions will help differentiate it and make it stand out from the other businesses that are offering potentially identical or similar services. So it gives people something emotional to attach to, which I believe is a great sort of tool to use, and I enjoy that it part of this the sort of evolution of the world is that we have these pools of global talent. We have the ability to work with people across the world. We have all of these things, but now at the same time, you need to compete. It's not that it used to be like you were competing for the smartest people in your city. Now those people have opportunities globally. So now you have to attract these people, not only from your city, but from around the world, because you're now competing for this talent everywhere. And I think this becomes a way of attracting, retaining, activating these human beings. And, some of the best business ideas, some of the best innovations, some of the things that have created the most value have come from inside the business and not from the leadership or the business. It's like that's where the brilliant stuff is coming from. And I think this will sort of, put a match to that and set it on fire. So I think it's amazing.
And what you're saying right now is so important because that all lives in the people first mindset of Do More Good Companies. More than just words, Do More Good Companies must empower the people that work inside the organizations to bring their ideas, their inspiration, their opportunities, their obstacles. It's not something that we have a program where our employees are allowed to respond to a survey once a quarter and to tell us, their ideas. Do More Good Companies have a process, an intentional process that empowers every single person in the organization to bring these opportunities, obstacles, and other things to the table on a regular sequence. And there's an expectation that's what they do, that they have a voice and they're expected to use it. Not just encouraged, they're expected to use it. And what we find when this happens in companies, it elevates everything about the organization, and the entire organization is inherently focused on finding a better way. 1 week after the next, just finding a better way, constant iteration and evolvement.
I think it's also, we always look, I think most brands, especially anything in service, the human beings are where your brand lives and dies, because you can have beautiful marketing and an amazing campaign and it all looks really good. And even the sales team is super slick, but then it comes time to the product team to deliver or the services. And if they show up and do a lackluster, kind of job, it affects everything. But if the people who show up fully, the chances of people remembering your brand, referring you, all of these kind of things become more sort of exponential.
Yeah, it lives in the promise and the experience, the aspects of the brand that connect it to the consumer. It's more than just the identity. Or the perception and even how we infuse purpose into a brand. It's about the promise delivered and the experience of the end user. That's so key.
Well, Jay, we've reached the end of our time, and it went really quickly, which is always the mark of a good conversation for me. And I'm taking away quite a lot here. And for me, I think this, you've talked about people first, using purpose and having this growth, kind of mindset, which is lovely. But the idea that I've drawn a big circle around is this idea of creating belonging, and how can you create belonging? And in that, it sort of asks many questions around where the benefit of all of this lies and who's winning in the end. And I think that unlocks some great opportunities. So,
Yeah, I'm excited about the work you're doing, and am excited to dig in deeper into learning more about the important things you're doing. So thank you for including me in this.
Awesome.